At the very dinner I believed would be the first step in reconciling with my son after many years apart. The glass of wine I raised contained something that could turn me into a puppet, and then make me sign away the entire fortune I had built over my lifetime. The person behind it was no stranger, but my own flesh and blood, my son whom I had sacrificed everything to raise. Before I reveal the horrifying truth, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are listening from in the comments. Your support is the motivation for me to continue exposing family tragedies that few dare to speak of. Evenings on the Oregon coast often arrive with a cold gray light like a thin blanket. I had grown used to it after 40 years of living by the Pacific, yet each time the fog rolled in from the water to the wooden porch, I still startled, as if Clara had just opened the door. We had fixed this house with our own hands, every board and every nail. After Clara left, everything stayed in place, except the kettle that never whistled again. I brewed coffee in the old brass pot and placed a porcelain cup on the windowsill, overlooking the rocks. Seagulls circled, waves lapped like the familiar chatter of an old couple. On the pine wall, the wedding photo still hung. Clara with brown hair, smiling with her whole face. Edward Monroe at 30, believing that hard work and luck would always be on his side. Sometimes I talked to the photo as if Clara had only gone to the town market. I am 68 years old, the owner of Monroe's Oyster Seafood chain in Portland. My name appears in articles about the man who started a business in middle age, but if anyone asked what I am proudest of, I would say Clara and Nathan. I remember the evening when Nathan was in 12th grade, wearing an apron dusted with flour after helping his mother bake. He sat on the wooden steps watching the rain and said he wanted to do something big with his name on a building. I told him, big or small, doesn't matter, as long as you stand tall when you sign your name. 2 years ago, we argued over a signature. Nathan brought home a thick stack of documents, saying it was a luxury housing project overlooking the Willamette River. He needed a seed investment, $500,000, to lock the land before venture funds swooped in. I read all night, marking vague numbers and cloud-like assumptions in red. The next morning I said no. I didn't say my son was incapable. I just said no. Nathan froze, then growled, "You never believed in me." He shoved the chair, shoes thudding on the floor. From the door he looked back, eyes burning with anger and sorrow. "I'll prove it." Since then we hadn't spoken a word. Clara had already gone a year before. I no longer had a mediator to smooth the wrinkles in father-son conversations. The man by the sea learned silence, driving to the city at dawn, visiting one restaurant, checking the freezer in another, signing invoices, asking new employees if they were used to the work yet. At night, I returned to the wooden house, listened to the waves, and rearranged postcards Clara had once sent me from food fairs. I thought I would live like that for years, until tonight, when the landline buzzed with an old-fashioned rhythm. I glanced at the wall clock, just past 7. On the other end was Portland, an unknown number. I considered letting it ring, but something pushed my finger to the green button. "Hello. Dad?" The voice was hoarse and low, as if it had walked too long in the rain. "It's me, Nathan." I gripped the receiver so tightly my knuckles whitened. For a moment I couldn't find any words. We had once talked endlessly. Grilled oyster recipes, how to choose kitchen knives, the name of the 2001 basketball team, and Christmas wishes. But between that "Hello, Dad" and the "I'll prove it" were 2 years stretched like a taut string. I cleared my throat. "I'm listening." Nathan paused between breaths. "I've been thinking a lot. If Mom were alive, she wouldn't like us staying silent like this. Could you, tonight, come to my house for dinner?" Isabella made clam chowder, the kind you like. I looked at Clara's photo. Rarely had I felt her presence so vividly. Clara had a smile that lowered defenses. What would she say if she heard her son's hesitant apology? Perhaps she would tell me, "Just listen. Don't rush to judgment. I switched the receiver to my right hand and laid my left hand on the wooden table, feeling the grain. Where? I asked. West Hills. I'll text you the address, Nathan babbled, as if afraid I'd change my mind. Just dinner. We want to start over. I chuckled. The laugh was dry in my throat. Are you sure Isabella wants to host a grumpy old man like me? I heard Isabella's voice in the background, soft, rounded like someone trained in elocution. I'd be happy if you came, Mr. Monroe. Edward, I corrected reflexively. Just call me Edward. Yes, Edward. She slowed down. The last 2 years were a waste. I hope tonight we can close an old door. Maybe, maybe not. I had seen many people press the reset button only to repeat the same mistakes. But when someone offers to put the knife down on the table, a chef like me seldom refuses. 8 o'clock then? I asked. I still have to stop by the central kitchen. Yes, I'll send the address. Thank you, Dad Nathan replied, his breath lighter. When I put the receiver down, the living room felt larger. I opened the window for the damp wind to blow in, carrying salt and seaweed. A small fishing boat crossed the horizon, its lights scribbling on the water like hurried pen strokes. I finished the cold coffee, thinking of the big soup pot in the Pearl District restaurant, of regulars clinking spoons against bowls like tiny glass bells. I thought of 12-year-old Nathan holding a scrap of wood and calling it a house. I thought of Nathan 2 years ago, slamming down a thick file. I showered, turning the sea's salt into warmth. I chose the navy shirt, which Clara once said looked sharp, and the wool coat I reserved for partner meetings. In the corner of the closet hung a burgundy tie Nathan had given me when we opened our 5th branch. I hadn't worn it in 2 years, a clumsy act of self-punishment. Tonight, I knotted it in front of the mirror. The reflection showed a 68-year-old man with wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, but a gaze that was still the same. Hopeful, yet cautious. I copied Nathan's address onto a small slip of paper, Skyline Boulevard, West Hills. The affluent hillside overlooked the river like a grand stage. I didn't ask why Nathan lived there. People move on, I told myself, but sweat coated my palms. A father who knew the Portland housing market, down payments, property taxes. A father who once said no to a clouded project. I placed a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir in a canvas bag, a simple gift I always brought to dinner invitations. I didn't drink much, but I understood the meaning of wine at dinner. It doesn't say I'm sorry for you, but it says I come in goodwill. I tucked in a fresh sourdough loaf from the restaurant. Isabella said clam chowder, and bread always completes soup. As I stepped onto the porch, my phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. I really look forward to seeing you. I typed quickly. I'm on my way. The old pickup roared to life, the engine noisy then steady. I drove onto Highway 101, turned to 26 toward the city. Night had fallen, but Portland glowed warmly in its own way. Neon signs of diners, cyclists bent against the drizzle, cars moving slowly like people conversing. I turned on the radio for traffic updates, then switched it off. I wanted only the sound of the wipers sweeping rain and the familiar hum of the engine. As I neared West Hills, the road curved along the slope, houses glowing here and there against the dark like fireflies. I felt my heartbeat steady. I had weathered enough storms to understand. The most important things in life often begin with the simplest words. Let's have dinner, let's talk, I'm sorry. And they often end with words just as simple. Well then, that's it. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Nathan. I'm waiting on the porch. Drive safely. I wasn't used to a gentle Nathan. I reminded myself not to read every signal in my favor. People can be genuinely kind, or politeness can be step one in their plan. At my age, I assumed both could be true at once. I parked in front of the gate, looking at the modern wooden house with wide glass walls, warm golden light spilling onto the stone-paved yard. An SUV sat by the garage. Inside the living room, the silhouette of a woman moved like a soft brushstroke against bright paper. Surely, Isabella. On the porch. Nathan stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, staring at the steps as if counting the patterns in the stone. I shut off the engine, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The bottle of wine was steady in my hand. The hill's breeze carried the scent of damp, freshly cut grass. Nathan looked up. The porch light revealed his thinner face and darker eyes. He hesitated, then smiled, stepping down. "Dad," he said. "Nothing more, nothing less." "It's late," I replied. That was all. We stood facing each other for a beat, enough to hear the back door unlock and Isabella's heels tapping lightly on the tiles. She appeared with a refined smile, hands folded in front. "Hello, Edward," she said with the warmth of a well-prepared evening. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, my throat dry. For a fleeting second I thought of Clara. If she were here, she would squeeze my hand, or glance at me with that signal. To calm down, just listen. I stepped onto the porch. The door opened wide. Light and the scent of butter spread out like an invitation. I did not know what awaited me inside. I only knew that tonight I would listen, and if needed, I would stand tall when signing my name. "I have always admired you, Dad," Nathan interjected, his voice deliberately gentle. "I think it's time for you to rest. You have worked your whole life. Sometimes letting the next generation take over is natural." The sentence fell onto the table like a heavy drop of water. I looked at my son. His face was bright in the light, but at the corners of his eyes was a small crease. Not the crease of age, but of worry. "The next generation can only shoulder the load when it is ready," I replied, keeping my voice even. "A restaurant is not just recipes or a brand. It requires discipline. It requires transparency." Nathan gave an awkward smile, then poured more wine into my glass. I covered it with my hand. "That's enough. I don't want to drink much tonight." The air settled for a beat. Isabella quickly filled the gap. "Let's not talk about work. Tell us about the first time you and Mom opened the place." There must be many memories. I looked at her smile. A smile too perfect, as if practiced in front of a mirror. But memories of Clara softened me. I told them about the days the two of us painted the walls of the first restaurant in the Pearl District, with our own hands, about opening night when Clara stood at the bar mixing cocktails for regulars. The story pulled me back into the past and made me briefly forget the tension hanging in the air. "It sounds like a fairy tale," Isabella sighed. "I wish we could have a journey like that." "It's just that nowadays everything is more complicated." Lucia returned to clear the soup bowls and replace them with roasted salmon. When she set the plate in front of me, I caught that troubled look again. This time, she shook her head very slightly, as if signaling something. I sat still, the unease inside me spreading. There was something beneath this perfect surface, but I said nothing. I simply smiled, cut a piece of salmon, and listened to my son continue at length about real estate projects that remained unclear. In Nathan's eyes, I saw the light of ambition. In Isabella's, I saw cold calculations. And in Lucia's fleeting glance, I saw something else, a silent warning. I lifted my glass to my lips but did not drink. I set it down, my hand slightly trembling. In my mind, the sound of the sea at the house on the shore echoed back, a rhythm far more peaceful than this reunion, dinner turning into an elaborate play before me. The dinner stretched into the main course. Italian-style roasted beef, glazed with red wine sauce, was plated on white porcelain, ringed with colorful steamed vegetables. Nathan served my portion, his smile trying to remain natural, but his hand slightly shaking, as if he too were playing a role that did not belong to him. Isabella raised her glass. "Edward, you have built a legacy. But Nathan and I think perhaps it is time that legacy needs a bridge to go further, and that bridge is us." She set the glass down and slid a thick file toward me, its dark blue leather cover catching a cold reflection from the chandelier. "This is the plan to expand Monroe's oyster into the California market," she said, her voice so sweet its aftertaste lingered in the air. "We have researched thoroughly, Partners are ready, and funding is ready. All you need to do is sign a power of attorney, so Nathan can be the named operator. We will handle the rest of the paperwork. I set down my knife and wiped my hands with the napkin. Power of attorney, I repeated slowly, pressing each word. Yes, Nathan cut in, striving to keep calm. You are also at the age to retire. You have the right to enjoy yourself and let us work. You just need to sign, and we will carry the load for you. I opened the cover. The papers were printed on thick stock with a clear title, General Power of Attorney. I had signed hundreds of contracts in my life, but rarely anything this direct, transferring total authority to my son. This cannot be decided over a single dinner, I said, closing the file. Isabella leaned in, her eyes glinting with resolve. Edward, think of your health. You have done enough. It is time for the young to take over. I promise we will guard everything like a treasure. Meanwhile, Nathan took the Pinot Noir and filled my glass to the brim, nearly overflowing. Just one more sip, Dad. For a new beginning, I raised my hand, but his was quicker. The glass was full, rippling. I looked at the dark red liquid. A light wave of dizziness washed over me. I remembered I had only had 2 glasses, not enough to make my head this heavy. Lucia entered with a silver tray, her glance flicking toward me. I caught a flash of fear in her eyes. She set a bread plate on the table, her hand lightly trembling, then hurried back to the kitchen. Isabella smiled, resting her hand on the file. If you sign tonight, we can proceed immediately. Opportunity waits for no one. Edward Nathan nudged a pen toward me. His eyes were taut, as if his survival depended on that signature. I leaned back, fingers interlaced. You two are in quite a hurry, I said, keeping my tone even. But an old man like me often needs more time to digest. Not just this roast beef, but big proposals like this. Nathan smiled weakly, but a flicker of anxiety crossed his eyes. He poured more wine into his own glass and lifted it. Then, at least let's share another toast. To the future, I looked at the wine in my glass. The sharp scent was stronger than usual. For a moment, my throat went dry, but I did not drink. I only touched my glass to Nathan's, the chime of crystal sounding cold, like a bell of forewarning. Across the table, Isabella gave her husband a slight nod, and I suddenly understood. This dinner was not a reunion. This was a chessboard already set. I set the glass down and smiled. You said you wanted to talk about family. Then tell me, what does family mean to you? For an instant, Nathan faltered, and Isabella pressed her lips together. The air was strung tight as a bow. I did not take another sip, but deep in my chest my heart pounded, from the wine's effect and from a premonition. Something dangerous was prowling inside this very house. The wall clock in the dining room struck 9 times, the second hand ticking steadily. Yet inside me, time seemed to jump, each second stretching into a full minute. My head grew heavier, but not from intoxication. A different sensation, strange and abnormal, as if something were mixing into my blood. I dabbed the corner of my mouth with the napkin and gave a faint smile. Excuse me, I need to step out for a moment. The bathroom is at the end of the hall on the left. Isabella quickly directed me, her voice too quick for ordinary courtesy. I stood up, walking slowly to hide the slight sway in my body. The hallway was long, floored with gleaming marble. Wall sconces reflected off a crooked, abstract painting, like an eye following me. My steps felt heavy as lead when the phone in my pocket buzzed violently. I startled and pulled it out. An unknown number with no name appeared on the screen. I opened it. Just one line in capital letters. Leave the house now. Do not drink any more. Do not say anything to them. My chest seized. Cold sweat ran down my back. I looked up at the empty corridor, so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. Who knew I was here and even knew I had just had wine? A second message arrived immediately, urging me on. They are just waiting for you to sign. If you delay, it will be too late. I stiffened. The scattered pieces of this evening, overfilled wine, Lucia's gaze, the prearranged power of attorney file snapped together into a frightening picture. Behind me, footsteps sounded. Nathan said, "Are you all right, Dad?" "You've been gone a while." I turned, hiding the phone in my palm. "I'm fine. Just a bit lightheaded from the rich food." He smiled awkwardly. "You should drink more water. Isabella has dessert ready. You'll like it." I nodded, forcing calm. When Nathan turned to walk ahead, I took a step back and slipped the other way. At the end of the hall, instead of the bathroom, I pushed open the door to the kitchen. Lucia stood at the sink, back to me, shoulders taut. At the sound of the door, she flinched. Seeing it was me, she quickly lowered her face and whispered, barely audible, "You must leave." "Right now, why?" I asked softly, my voice rough. She turned, her eyes glistening under the fluorescent light. "They put something in the wine." I saw it with my own eyes. "If you sign those papers, everything will be gone." I clenched my fist, my heart hammering. "Did you text me?" Lucia swallowed, glanced toward the door, then gave a small nod. I found a way to get your number. I looked up your restaurant chain online, called one branch, and asked a staff member named Kelly to help pass it along. She thought I was an old acquaintance, so she gave it to me. I know it crossed a line, but otherwise I had no way to warn you." Lucia said no more. She flicked her eyes toward the back door, then whispered, "Go. Don't let them see me talking." I looked in the direction she indicated. The back door opened to a dark garden, a path of white gravel leading down to a low fence. Outside, the dim streetlights of West Hills cast a pale, distant glow. Inside me, two currents of feeling wrapped around each other. The pain of realizing my own son could betray me, and the survival instinct screaming that I had to get out of here. I turned to look at Lucia one last time. She had bent over the sink, hands trembling around a towel, as if she had said nothing at all. The phone buzzed once more in my pocket. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read any more to know. With each second I lingered, that trap would close tighter. I drew a deep breath and pushed open the back door. The cold night air rushed in. I stepped down the stone steps, the scattered gravel crunching under my heels like a drumbeat, urging a man to choose between his own blood and his own life. The night chill flooded in as I stood in the West Hills garden. With a shaking hand, I pulled the phone from my jacket pocket. My first thought was to open a taxi app, leave this place at once, and pretend this dinner had never happened. If I just walked through that gate, I would be safe. But immediately another thought crashed through my head. If I left, all the evidence would disappear. That wine glass would be washed clean, those papers hidden away, and I would never be able to prove the truth. All that Clara and I had built would be buried under the deceit of my own son. I stopped and drew a long breath. I could not leave. I needed to turn that very room into a crime scene, so the law could see the truth with its own eyes. I dialed 911, my voice hoarse but firm. "My name is Edward Monroe. I am at number 1420 Maple Drive, West Hills. I am being poisoned and forced to sign documents transferring my assets. Please send the police immediately." The dispatcher confirmed that the nearest patrol unit was on its way. Right after that, I called Samuel Price, the trusted attorney who had stood by me for 30 years. Just hearing his voice steadied me. "Samuel, come now." "I am being forced to sign unlawful papers. Bring the company files. The police are on their way, too," he answered briefly. "I will be there in 15 minutes. I put the phone away, straightened my tie, and went back inside. The gleaming dining room reappeared like a counterfeit stage. Nathan looked up, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Isabella smiled, but the smile was dry, like lipstick flaking under bright lights. I sat down at the head of the table, deliberately calm, as if I had only stepped out for a breath of fresh air. "Are you feeling better, Dad?" Nathan asked awkwardly. "Better. A glass of water suits me more right now." I slid the glass of water Lucia had brought to the front. Nathan set the pre-poured wine glass near my hand, trying to sound affectionate. "Dad, we haven't had our toast to a new beginning." I only smiled, turned the glass lightly, but did not lift it. Isabella placed her slender hand on my shoulder, her voice sugary. "We also prepared a few simple formalities so everything in the family is arranged properly." I kept silent. With every passing second, the police and Samuel were a block closer. My job was down to one thing: sit here, keep everything as it was, and wait for red and blue lights to wash across the window. When I came in, Lucia was pressed near the kitchen door. Her shoulders jerked as if she realized something was different when she saw me return. Her eyes flashed with surprise, then tightened with worry, as if she could not understand why the master had come back instead of leaving. She shut her lips, hesitated a second, then bent to her work. Only when Lucia wasn't looking straight at me did I study the wine glass before me more closely. At first it was only a carefully poured, beautiful glass of wine, but when the light struck across it, I saw tiny pale particles, drifting and then sinking to the bottom, a faint streak of matter like undissolved residue. If you didn't look closely, you would miss it. It was very subtle. That very streak told me for certain the wine had been tampered with. I sat still, breathing slowly, feeling each second stretch long. Inside me, a low flame flared. This time, I would not let false kinship destroy the work of my entire life. The pendulum clock in the dining room sounded 10 times, its muffled tone spreading like a reminder of each passing second. I sat at the head of the table, outwardly composed, while every vein in me hammered. I knew the police and Samuel were only a few blocks away. I had to preserve the scene until they came in. Nathan pulled his chair closer and set a cream-colored envelope on the table. He drew a breath and began to rattle on, as if rehearsed long ago. "Dad, you only need to sign a few of these papers. I want everything in the family to go smoothly and legally. Just your signature, and everything will be simple." Nathan leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry. I have already prepared all the legal formalities. A mobile notary is waiting outside in the car. They will certify as soon as you sign. One stamp, and these documents are absolutely legal. No one can dispute them. This is the contract to expand the restaurant chain into California. I have calculated carefully. The first month's revenue will exceed $100,000, with extremely high profit. If we open 5 locations at once, in only 1 year, the money we bring in will be many times the current amount." Isabella cut in, her eyes shining as if to hypnotize. "Just think. If you sign, everything is already in place. They are waiting to transfer the funds. You won't have to worry about anything anymore." I looked at the columns of assumed numbers Nathan pushed toward me, the hurried type, the tables full of projected and estimated items. Outsiders might be dazzled by big figures, but I had spent a lifetime in business. I knew at once it was a castle built on sand. I pretended to furrow my brow, blinking slowly, my voice rough like a man beginning to feel a drugged wine. "Sounds big. $100,000 a month. But—" I paused, leaning back as if searching for breath. "The partners. Are they real? Where are they?" Nathan rushed to answer, his words losing coherence. "You don't need to meet them. I have discussed everything. As soon as you sign, everything will go through. This is a golden opportunity. If we delay, they will walk away." I glanced at Isabella. Her face was taut, lips pressed, though she tried to smile. Her hand on her lap trembled, fingers tapping a jagged rhythm. I noticed their eyes flicking constantly, like 2 actors afraid the script was about to collapse. I lifted the water, took a small sip, then pretended to wobble as I set it down. "I'm a bit dizzy, but I want to understand. Tell me again. Cash flow and the partners. Have they promised anything in writing yet?" Nathan frowned, his voice quickening like a man being cornered. "Everything is prepared. The papers are right here, just the signature. If you keep hesitating, the opportunity will slip away. I gave a thin smile, my tone hazy but sharp enough to pierce them. Papers don't have legs. How can they run away? The room sank. Nathan's gaze darkened. Veins rose on his neck. Isabella lowered her face, her hand gripping his under the table. All the strain showed in the smallest details. Details most would miss, but I saw clearly. I leaned back, eyes half closed, feigning a loss of control. In truth, I was only drawing out each minute, each second. With every moment, the sirens were closer. Nathan set a pen by the envelope, his eyes locked on me. His voice dropped, tight as a bowstring. Dad, just sign here. Everything will be done tonight. Isabella moved behind me, her cold hand on my shoulder, squeezing lightly. You're tired. Don't think so much. Just one signature. The smile remained on her lips, but her eyes were glaringly bright, tension making her lashes tremble. I lifted the pen, my hand slightly shaking as if under the drugged wine. The entire room went silent, leaving only the tick of the second hand. Nathan held his breath, Isabella pressed harder on my shoulder, and Lucia stood by the kitchen door, her hands twisting together. I bent forward, the pen tip just touching the paper, when red and blue light swept across the window, casting shimmering shadows on the wall. Immediately, a thundering knock rattled the door, 3 short, decisive beats. Police! Open the door now. The air shattered. Lucia dropped the silver tray, the metal clanging dully outward. I set the pen down and looked straight at my son. Nathan's face went ashen, and Isabella snatched her hand from my shoulder as if burned. The door opened and 2 officers stepped in, Samuel arriving almost at the same time. The lead officer held out his badge, voice clear. We received a report of poisoning and coercion to sign unlawful documents at this address. Everyone, remain where you are, Nathan stammered, forcing a smile. Is there some mistake? This is just a family dinner. Samuel came to my side, his gaze steady. Edward, you're safe now. Let them do their job. One officer approached the table and picked up the wineglass I hadn't touched. Under the chandelier, the tiny residue showed clearly, swirling into faint streaks, evidence that could not be denied. He immediately sealed it in an evidence bag. This is evidence of poisoning, the officer said flatly. The second officer opened the envelope and pulled out the stack of papers. His voice was cold. A contract transferring the entire restaurant chain and a power of attorney for management. Mr. Monroe, you confirm you have not signed. I have not signed, I said firmly, and I never will. Isabella stepped forward, her voice pitch rising in panic. No! This is just a draft. We only wanted to prepare for the future. Samuel turned and gave a thin smile. A draft? With drugs in the wine? Hard to believe Nathan's snarl, panic blazing in his eyes. Dad! Why would you do this? I only wanted what's best for you. I looked straight into my son's eyes, each word heavy as stone. If you wanted what's best, you would not have spiked your father's wine. Cold steel cuffs flashed under the lights. The 2 officers stepped forward, their tone devoid of leniency. Richard Nathan Monroe and Isabella Monroe, you are under arrest for conspiracy to poison and to coerce the transfer of assets. The dry snap of handcuffs echoed, ending the counterfeit play. The blue and red lights outside still flashed, casting a cold hue of justice over the luxurious room. The dining room fell silent after the clang of cold steel. Nathan bowed his head, veins standing out on his neck, while Isabella trembled so badly her lipstick smeared at the corners of her mouth. I sat motionless, hearing only my heart pounding like a war drum. Yet in that moment, I knew there was still one crucial piece needed to make the truth complete. Lucia still stood pressed against the kitchen door. She looked at me with wet eyes, then slowly stepped forward, her thin hands gripping her apron for courage. An officer looked at her and asked, Do you know anything about this? Lucia drew a long breath, her voice shaking but clear. I saw everything. Tonight, while setting the table, I heard them plotting. They said they would put a drug into Mr. Monroe's wine. I even saw Isabella herself open a small packet and stir it into the glass. Isabella screamed, her voice cracking. "She's lying!" "She's just the help. How could she know anything?" Lucia lifted her head, avoiding nothing for the first time. "I've worked in this house for 8 years. I know every habit, every phrase, and I know when someone is hiding something. I saw it, and I was the one who texted Mr. Monroe so he could get away in time." Nathan thrashed, his voice choked. "Lucia! You betrayed us? After all these years eating our food, now you—" Lucia cut him off, eyes shining with tears. "I didn't betray anyone. I simply couldn't stay silent and watch you poison your own father. Family is to protect one another, not to kill." She paused, her voice tight but resolute. "I came to this country with empty hands. I once watched my own father back home be cheated out of his land by his own brothers, abandoned in illness until he died. From that day, I swore I would never stay silent if I saw the same thing. When I looked at Mr. Monroe, I saw my father. I could not let that tragedy repeat those words, slice through the lies like a blade." An officer nodded, writing quickly, "Witness confirms preparation and execution of spiking the wine." Samuel stepped forward, voice firm. "This testimony, together with the physical evidence on the table, is more than enough to prosecute. I will ensure the witness is protected." I looked at Lucia, my throat tight. That woman, once quietly tidying the house, now stood tall before everyone, becoming the key that brought the truth into the light. I gave a slight nod, my thanks choked but profound. Lucia bowed, tears running down her cheeks, yet a faint smile touched her lips. She knew that from this moment on she was no longer just a housekeeper. She had become a keeper of justice. The interrogation room at the West Hills police station glowed with cold white light, smooth concrete walls reflecting our shapes. I sat on one side of the metal table, Samuel beside me, the open file before us. Across from us, Nathan and Isabella sat close together, their wrists secured with soft cuffs. Their eyes flickered constantly, both defiant and panicked. An investigator set the sealed wine glass and the envelope of documents on the table, his voice solid. "These are the items seized at the scene. A rapid test suggests an anticholinergic sedative. The sample will be sent to the lab for confirmation." Nathan jerked up instinctively but was forced down by the cuffs, his voice breaking. "No! That's just a mistake. I never meant to hurt Dad. We only wanted him to rest." Isabella jumped in at once, shrill and hurried. "That's right. We only wanted to help him sign early so everything would go smoothly. He's old and might not understand everything. We did this for the family." Samuel tapped his pen on the metal table, eyes like steel. "You thought a notary stamp would cover it up? Even if the notary colluded, any document signed while under the influence of a drug is void, and that notary will go to prison with you. Stop deluding yourselves." The room sank into silence. An officer nodded, recording, "Sufficient grounds to charge conspiracy to poison and abuse of an elder. The file will be forwarded to the district attorney." The door opened and Lucia stepped in, still in her simple uniform. Her hands were clasped tightly, but her gaze was steady. "I saw it with my own eyes," she said, crisp and clear. "I saw Isabella pour the packet into the glass. And I heard Nathan say that once Mr. Monroe signed, all the papers would be transferred out that very night." An officer turned to Nathan. "Do you deny this testimony?" Nathan stared at Lucia, his face twisted, eyes raging and desperate. He stammered, She's making it up. A housekeeper doesn't know anything." Lucia no longer trembled. She looked straight at him and answered cleanly, "I know the truth." I turned to my son, pain stabbing inside me, but my voice came out cold. "Nathan, you can fool others with numbers and phantom projects, but your shaking eyes and Isabella's hands have already exposed you." The room fell into heavy silence. The officer nodded, noting decisively. There are sufficient grounds to charge conspiracy to poison and abuse of an elder. The file will be sent to the district attorney. Samuel tilted his head toward me, his voice slow and sure. Edward, from now on the law will protect you. Don't worry, they cannot escape. I drew a deep breath, looking at Nathan and Isabella one last time. Before me were no longer a son and daughter-in-law, but two people who had chosen betrayal and driven themselves into a dead end. The interrogation room seemed tighter as the investigator set another file on the table. Outside, a strip of light sliced through the door crack like a blade. Samuel flipped a few pages, then tapped his pen 3 times on the metal tabletop, a clear signal that the real questioning had begun. Nathan, the chief investigator began in a gravelly voice, we have evidence you attempted to poison your own father. What we want to know is why. Why risk everything, including your freedom? Nathan slumped back, eyes vacant. He was silent for a few seconds, as if weighing whether to keep the mask on any longer. Isabella had already buried her face in her hands, mascara smeared. Finally, Nathan blurted out, his voice snapping like a string pulled too tight. Because I owe money. I owe too much. You don't understand, Dad. Those people don't just demand money. They threatened to crush me if I didn't come up with the cash within 10 days. The air in the room froze. How much in total? The officer asked. Nathan gave a bitter, rasping laugh. 2,700,000. I put it into a few out-of-state housing projects. All phantom. Then basketball betting, gambling. It all vanished. I thought I would hit it big. I thought, just one more time and I'd recover. But the more I tried, the deeper I sank. I sat silent, as if doused with ice water. 2,700,000. Enough to build 3 more restaurants. Enough for Clara and me to have a peaceful old age. And my son had burned it all on illusions. Isabella lifted her head, rushing to interject. Don't pin it all on me. I told him to stop. He dove in. You were involved, Samuel cut in, voice sharp as a blade. We already have evidence you researched Mr. Monroe's eating habits and prepared this plan for weeks. Don't expect to slip free. Nathan slammed his cuffed hands on the table, eyes bloodshot. I had no other way out. If I couldn't get Dad's assets, they would kill me. Do you think I had any choice? I looked straight at my son, each word weighed down. When you chose gambling, you had a choice. When you borrowed from criminals, you had a choice. And tonight, when you chose to poison your own father, you still had a choice. You chose wrong every time, Nathan. For a heartbeat, the room was absolutely silent. Only the clerk's pen scratched down every sentence, every word. The chief investigator closed the file and concluded, Debt pressure is never a reason to poison someone. Your charges stand. As for the underworld debts, we will refer this to the feds for investigation. If there's a loan sharking ring, we will handle it separately. But you will face justice first. Nathan dropped his head onto the table, his whole body shaking like a cornered animal. Isabella sat petrified, her eyes empty. I closed my eyes and drew a long breath. The pain remained, but I knew the truth had been laid bare, and from this moment there was no path back for those who betrayed. Dawn washed West Hills in pale gold. From the window of my small living room, light slipped through rough curtains onto Clara's smiling portrait. I sat there with a hot cup of coffee, my heart lighter after many heavy nights. The police had formally charged Nathan and Isabella. Testimony, evidence, forensic reports, all were enough to bring them to court. The trial date would come soon. I knew their fate now rested in the hands of justice. There was nothing left to argue. Last night, as we left the station, Samuel set a hand on my shoulder. Edward, you did the right thing. Don't let guilt obscure the truth. The guilty must pay. That is how you protect Clara's honor, too. Those words stayed with me through the night, making me understand I had chosen the hard road, but the necessary one. Lucia knocked and entered, holding a thin folder. She still wore her simple uniform, but her expression had changed, worried, yet hopeful. I gestured for her to sit. "I didn't think you would keep your word," she said softly, eyes shining with emotion. I smiled. "I promised. Starting next week, you will officially be a manager at the new restaurant in Portland, a worthy position with the pay and benefits someone like you deserves." Lucia's eyes brimmed. "Thank you. I once thought I was just an outsider. But when I saw you being cornered, I remembered my father long ago. He, too, was exploited by his own kin and lost everything. I swore that if I ever saw that again, I would not be silent." I went still. Her story not only explained Lucia's actions, but also held up a mirror for me. Some people share no blood, yet possess a honesty and courage that one's own kin sometimes lack. I opened the folder, signed the employment contract, and slid it to her. "This is a new beginning, Lucia. Not just for you, but for me, too." Outside the window, the first rays bathed the quiet neighborhood. For the first time in years, I felt I truly had a future to walk toward. I stood and set Clara's portrait on the table. "Do you see, love? In the end, the truth prevailed, and our legacy will not be buried by greed." In the small room, I knew I had closed the whirlpool of betrayal. Nathan and Isabella would pay for their choices, and I chose to move forward, with people who deserve it, with the values Clara once kept. In the end, the truth was exposed. Nathan and Isabella were no longer family, but criminals. The court would convict them for conspiracy to poison and to seize assets. Justice never overlooks, and the price of betrayal is always more bitter than any sentence. As for me, I chose to move on with those who deserve it, the values my wife once believed in. That is the real victory. If this story made you think, please share your thoughts in a comment. And don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Every bit of your support is the motivation that helps me keep exposing the painful hidden corners of family life.